Previously on agentpalmer.com, Deke Slayton's autobiography is one of the best to cover the golden era of spaceflight. The Magus is filled with timeless truths and odd mysteries, and I hope you all learned something new about my past from Nick last episode. This is the Palmer Files, episode 35, with spaceflight historian Amy Shira Teitel, who may have the coolest job and best job title around. We discuss our shared interests in space, the process of writing books, being in love with what's next, missing our Apollo moment, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 35th episode is Amy Shira Teitel, whose book, Fighting for Space, I reviewed, and whose title as a freelance spaceflight historian is perhaps the coolest title on the planet Earth. I invited Amy on the show not just because I enjoyed her book, but because I don't often get to geek out about space. Marvel, Tolkien, Star Wars, you've heard me geek out about those topics. Writing, being creative, organization, you've heard me geek out on those topics too. But space geeks exist, and I'm a pretty big one. And Amy, well, the space is her space. So we do geek out on space, but that's not all you'll hear. We discuss space, surely, the past, the present, and future, but we also discuss being a creative, writing books, learning, reading, and much, much more. It's more than a full payload of conversation, and it's completely nominal. Before we get it going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you could tweet me at Agent Palmer, the show at The Palmer Files, or Amy at Amy Shira Teitel. That's AMYSHIRATEITEL. You can also use that same name and spelling to follow her on Instagram, and you can visit amyshirateitel.com for links to her books and more content. She's also on YouTube at youtube.com/vintagespace and streaming on Twitch as The Space Vixen. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings, including my review of Amy's book Fighting for Space on agentpalmer.com, and of course email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's try SCE to aux. Amy, I have been racking my brain for my own personal answer to the question I'm starting out for you, which is, I love space stuff. And I've always loved space stuff. And I have been having trouble figuring out why that has always been the case for me. So I will ask you, why do you enjoy space things?
That is the long answer question. For me, it started, I love that I have such a great memory of my origin story, my space origin story. Though I would be a very bad superhero because my superhero talent would be writing.
No, that's it's a great superpower.
We'll take it. I like that. When I was 7 years old, I was researching for a second grade project on Venus. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever that, like, it's roughly the same size as the Earth. You can see it without a telescope, but it's also, like, rotates backwards and is basically gonna cook you alive. And it was just like this introduction to the variety in our own backyard, but that I thought was so cool. So I had this little book called 1001 Facts About Space. And in it, there was like a 2-page spread per planet, per topic, and there's one on the moon with a little cartoon of 2 astronauts in front of a lunar module. And I was like, people went to the moon? Why was I not informed? And like, I'm from Canada. We don't have NASA, so not everyone and their grandfather has a connection to the space agency. So it was this thing of like, oh my God, I need to know all about this. And it's one of those things that like the more questions you ask, the more you dig, the bigger the answer becomes. So for me, it's been like this childhood fascination that just leads to more questions instead of just finding more answers, which makes it really fun.
So I could have been on that trajectory.
What was your story?
I've been trying to think about, I know I was fascinated by space and space travel at around, age 6, 7, something along those lines. And, around that time, I would have always said like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. Like that was what I was going to do.
Not astronaut?
No, I never had the, like, I think I knew my limitations even at early, like it was like, I'm not cut out for the travel part. Right. But I wanted to work for NASA. And then I think what happened was, I got completely taken off course by a really good English teacher, and the fact that at the same time I got that really good English teacher, I had problems in like the advanced maths, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, okay. And then I went all in on writing and became a comms major in college. And it wasn't until the last maybe 5 or 6, 7 years where I started really getting back into reading that I've kind of been all in on like a NASA kick. So I've been reading every bio / autobiography I can get my hands on. And so it's just kind of always been there as like a hobby-ish, but like I looking back, I know now, like I think I made the right path. I think the math would have been too hard for me, but like I kind of envy you in like you got to do research and write a book about this stuff, and I'm like, that sounds like fun.
It's funny you say that, because like your story super resonates with me, and I think resonates with a lot of people, because I've had this conversation with a ton of people. Like I also had the poor math teacher experience. Actually, in the 9th grade, my class had something like 7 math teachers, which is like a foundational year, first year of high school, to like get some of the basics for when you start going into things like calculus and all the fancy math you need. So I wasn't bad at math. I wasn't necessarily the best at math, but like like that foundational year was just like a hot mess of substitutes, every one of them starting again. And I went to a French school, so it was half in English, half in French. The whole thing was just like a hot mess. We did not have the same teacher until the last 3 years of high school. And my school did 5 years of high school. I always feel like I have to qualify that. So it was like a year and a half of madness, a half year of a little bit of stability. And then by the time we got into stuff with one teacher, it was like, well, now I'm just not good at this. And everyone was like, but you're artistic. Go write. And I'm like, but you also don't want people to go to art school, because that's not a job. So it's just like, it really was like, I was in that weird spot where I was like, I don't even know what to do. And I got so lucky that I ended up at an undergrad university that had history of science as a major. That's not a thing you see very often. So that's what taught me that you can do science that's made of history and not made of math.
Wait, hold on.
And it was like,
hold on, though, because I'm so confused. History of science, like that.
History, yeah.
So just like
as a discipline,
kind of, as a discipline. So like basically like English lit, but science
but
stuff.
Science, yeah. So what it was, and it's a little liberal arts college in Halifax called King's College, and it's one of, if not the only university I've ever heard of that does it at an undergraduate level. A lot of places do it at a graduate level, but it really was. It was like the history of Western thought as told through science. So it was like we started with the ancient Egyptians and a lot of ancient cultures, kind of going through. I mean, we had a class about alchemy with like literally looking at the recipes that have survived over the years, and then going through the, we stopped at about the Manhattan Project. So what was always weird to me is like, I've never had a history class that talked about space. I'm not from here, so we never learned about the Cold War growing up. So, and everything we did stopped around the Second World War. So it was always like this weird thing where I liked this history, but it wasn't in my history classes, but it also wasn't in my science classes. So it was only once I started doing history of science, I was like, oh, I can just make this my little self-specialty within this discipline. And it was like, the light bulb went off and everything changed. But it was still like 4 years before I figured out how to do that.
All right. So I want to show my kind of small little piece of Canadian aeronautical knowledge. I know enough about the Avro Arrow to know that the United States doesn't get to the moon if that project isn't canceled, because we needed all the mines we could get. Yeah. To do that,
the Canadian brain drain.
So, is that taught at least? Like, or is that just kind of swept under the rug a bit?
I feel like Okay, so I went to a French school, so we did a lot of European history. Like, I know more about Louis XIV's bathing habits than I do about the history of Canada, which is really unfortunate. And there's so many things that I've learned about the history of my own country recently in part of my self-education on U.S. history. I've done a lot about Cold War, obviously, but like, I'm fascinated by the American Civil War because it's such an interesting conflict with so many layers. And Canada leveraged the American Civil War to claim independence from the British. I never realized the dates lined up. So I'm like very curious to know about how that happened. So like there's so much stuff from Canadian history that you don't get taught, but what you do get taught is like that early stuff. You don't get taught 1950s history because I don't know if it was like in the 90s or the early 2000s that wasn't considered historical enough. It was weird. So like I also found out about the Arrow like as a grown up reading about it and saw this thing and like read about some engineer who worked on this Canadian project. And I was like, wait, what? So much of it is just like, I always joke, but it's not a joke at all. Like I've done so much more research as a freelance writer than I ever did as an academic. Cause like I get to follow all my own curiosities now. It's supposed to being like, well, make sure you study the historiography of this writer's. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have written books.
Mm-hmm.
Was that always a goal somewhere along the way? Or did that kind of start like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, what do I do with it?
I don't really, so this is the thing with my career as like a freelance spaceflight historian, which is not a job title anyone has or should really want to have.
No, but it should
like,
be on your resume because it's succinct.
Oh, it is. That is like literally when people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a spaceflight historian. For whom? Oh, a freelance. Like, what? And I'm like, yes. Come, let me tell you weird stories. I've always been a reader. I've always loved books. As an only child, books were like the thing you do to play when you don't have someone to play with because there's no brothers or sisters.
I can absolutely. I also.
You an only child?
Only child, so I understand that completely.
Right? Books become, especially like, I don't know how old you are, but I want to say we're probably roughly the same age, maybe 30s-ish.
Yeah, I'm late 30s is what we'll
okay,
go with.
Good. So we're about the same age. But yeah, it's like, you know, we didn't have phones with videos on them. We didn't have portable devices. So like road tripping to visit the grandparents in Maine, I was just reading in the car all the time. I was reading to like for entertainment.
But that's where I am now officially jealous of you. I got car sick too much. Like even the Game Boy was something I couldn't do. So reading in the car was not something I willed.
I think I willed myself away from car sickness because I remember one trip, my mom's from Maine and we did that road trip a bunch visiting family. And I remember one trip we were in New Hampshire and I was so nauseous. We had to stop for like an hour to let me breathe. And then I had to sit up front because it was just making me so sick. I feel like I willed myself to get past it because I couldn't stop reading in cars. My least favorite in the car trips was when they were long days and you could read and then the sun started to go down. It's like, it's so pretty out. But I can't read anymore. And now I can't see anything. Yeah, that was always like the nighttime road trip was like, it's pretty, but it's also dark to read. But yeah, no, I willed myself out of it. So I always loved books. And it was always like books were the thing my parents taught me that like books are always a good investment because you can always go back to them. If I, did well on some test or something, it was like, we can go get a book. Subsequently, both my house and my parents' house is just full of books.
So I'm gonna take a stab on something.
Yeah, I always wanted to write.
Did you grow up Jewish?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, well, ish is enough.
With the middle name Shira is kind of the dead giveaway.
I was a Reform Jew, so like Jewish light, right? That's how we explained it to everybody. But
Same.
I feel like the Jewishness of even Sunday school, or in my case, it was a very rural congregation, so we met once every other Saturday. But I think my Jewishness is basically asking questions is good. You're not always going to be told the answer. Sometimes you have to find it. And I find that it's something, I'm not going to say it's just inherently Jewish, but it's kind of added on to everything else. Books are important and education is important.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the cultural heritage aside from the religious part.
Yeah, I think because I always describe myself as traditionally Jewish, where like my mom's not Jewish, so I was never bat mitzvahed or anything, but I went to Jewish summer camps and had the high holidays and stuff. But as you're saying that, I'm immediately thinking of the 4 questions at Passover, when it's the different, like, was it the I can't remember the son, but just like the son who does not know how to ask, and the simple son, and the selfish son. I forget the first one, but the wicked son. What was the first one? The just blunt son, not the blunt son.
Simple, wicked, not afraid to ask.
Afraid to ask.
I can't remember either.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, just I feel like that because my family does most of it in English because we're not all fluent in Hebrew by a long shot. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting parable because of the way it leads you to learn about it in a way that kind of feeds like it. I do, now that you're saying that, only now that you're saying it am I realizing that like that is something that's kind of natural. This idea of like, you know, you can find the answers, you can look this up, you can broaden your own horizon and follow that curiosity. And I think it is something that becomes, whether you realize it or not, because I never did until now, culturally available or maybe more present in some cultures, but yeah. Or it could just be that we had similar families, for all I know.
It could be. So anyway, back to the writing aspect, or getting into writing, or the book, I guess.
Yeah. I always loved writing, and I always thought writing a book would be so cool. I just thought it'd be awesome to be like, oh, I did a thing. Look, my name is on the spine of that thing. That'd be really great. And the irony, I think, Alanis Morissette just ruined Canadians' understanding of irony for like an entire generation.
It wasn't just Canadians.
Oh God, yeah, I know, it's terrible. But it's when I wrote my master's thesis, my advisor's comment was like, it's good, it's interesting research, but you don't really write well for an academic. And I thought that was so funny because like not writing well for an academic is not necessarily a bad thing because academic writing is so boring. So writing with too much of a narrative, I was like, maybe there's something to this whole writing thing. So that's when I started writing a blog after I finished my master's degree, as like a placeholder to see if I could actually do popular science writing. And it just gradually was like, I like telling these stories. I want to dig into the narratives. And I just kind of started playing around with the idea of trying to turn something into a book to see if I could do it. Like I didn't even know how to do it. So I went to some like pitch conferences. I spoke to authors. I spoke to editors and stuff and kind of learned a little bit about the process. And it just so happened that like as I was doing all that, my first publisher, Bloomsbury, came to me and was like, we're putting together a new science list and I really like your stuff. Do you want to write a book? I was like, well, here's the proposal that I've been shopping around for 6 months. And he's like, cool, we'll take it. And I was like, I just got a book deal. Like it was just this surreal thing. And of course, learned a lot in the process of writing that book that I think made my second book, Fighting for Space, significantly better, in my opinion. The first one's good. It's but I like the narrative of the second one so much better. I learned to trust myself as a writer more. And I think my big thing when writing books, even about science, is I read a ton of fiction to understand how to create a narrative that draws you in. Because that's not exclusive to fiction. I think that can very well be applied to nonfiction.
Did you get to a chance? I've talked to authors before. Did you get a chance to celebrate I've published this book? Or like I feel like this is inherently a writer thing. Did you publish that book and go, all right, what's next?
More the second one for sure. And I think part of that in I'm trying to think what happened. When Breaking the Chains of Gravity came out, I had just moved to LA, and it was a private celebration when I got the first copy to just like open it up and just kind of like hold it and be like, I made this. Like I don't have kids, but it's closest I feel like I can understand to like I made a thing. So it was definitely like a private moment there, but like there was no big events. I had one book signing. This time I had a bit more way to celebrate it. I went to the Savannah Book Festival right before it came out that weekend, and then had a couple of events here, but then COVID hit. So like whatever there was to kind of celebrate of it all kind of disappeared and got really messy really, really quickly, because it was just it was hard to get coverage going into it because things are starting to get a little bit sketchy virus-wise, and then like within 2 weeks the country was in lockdown. So it kind of took the wind out of my sails a little bit on that one. And yeah, it very quickly switched into, okay, how, not quite yet what's next, but more the, okay, how do I maintain interest in this for a year so I can start trying to think about figuring out what's next.
There's no,
Yeah.
there's no break, and I feel like it's this is me generalizing, I guess. It's a romantically creative thing to be in love with what's next the moment you finish whatever it is that you finish. I'm just like I haven't written that big project. I'm a weekly blogger and a bi-weekly podcaster.
Yeah.
And I get wrapped up in the process as well. And those are smaller, like incremental things. And I've been doing it for so long that I'm thinking about the next three things. Now, if it was a book, it would not be the next three things, right? Like there's a limit, but it just seems like the people that are creative tend to not rest on their laurels because it's the most, the only thing I've got for it is it's the most selfish, what have you done for me lately? But the me is yourself, right? Like, what have I done lately?
Yeah. I think that's right, but I think there's an idea that like as creatives, you know, no one does one thing, because I'm just thinking about like, because I also do the YouTube thing, I also do, you know, the short form stuff at the same time, that like you can't really stop and rest on your laurels and celebrate these things because you're in a production cycle. And I think what it is like as a creative, the project isn't the individual blog or the individual video or the individual book. It's the oeuvre that you're creating, right? It's like that whole thing. So like that never stops. It's not that you're like not stopping to celebrate something. It's that you want to continue pushing your creativity. And that is what stops you from just stopping and completely just like, I'm taking a year off. Cause like no creative does that. I don't know a single creative that does that.
No, you're right. Like
everyone takes breaks. I'm about to take a month off for the holidays because I am very aware, just thinking about today, I'm very aware that I'm burnt out at the end of this year. So I've got a little bit of work to finish up, but it's like, but taking a break is still like going to be reading for the next videos, going to be planning the stuff to do when I get back to a more rigid cycle or work week cycle and stuff. But yeah, no one just stops.
I can't even remember how long ago it was, but there was a while where I had started the blog and I wasn't quite taking it as seriously as I probably wanted to.
Yeah.
And then I bought a house and like I looked back and I went, and then I moved into the house and I went, oh, I haven't written in like 3 months. So I challenged myself. I was like, all right, this is it. I mean, it's a weekly blog now, but I was like, I'm challenging myself 2 blogs a week for the next year. And it was going to be on a rolling calendar. So it started in November and a rolling year. That's 52 weeks, so that's 104 blogs.
That's a lot.
I wrote 137 that year, I think. Like,
wow,
I didn't just do it. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to take a break, but I am going to, like, pump the brakes, right? And go back to the weekly schedule that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think for the next 6 months, I averaged like 1.75 blogs a week. So it was still hovering around that 2 mark. Like, and it took a while to get to the point where I could actually bring it down to a weekly blog, except it didn't become a weekly blog until I started the podcast.
Right.
Like when it was just a blogger, it was still like 1.5. Like the averages were well above where it should be. So I get that like break time. And then I was single for a very long time. I would take holiday breaks and work on the next thing. Like my Christmas break used to be planning for the next year. That's what I did with that time off. Is like, all right, time to figure out what we're going to do. Let's see what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, my Christmas break this year is taking time, stepping a little bit away from work stuff to start playing with some other work stuff that I want to get into next year. Like it's true. I think I'm just thinking like, are creatives like sharks? They have to continually swim or they die. Like I feel like there's just creative brains constantly move and are constantly thinking. So if you're not engaging with some kind of content, even if it's just the planning stuff, it's just like, you don't know how to not do that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've not read a book for, I've read books for pleasure, but I've reviewed every single one of them. Like
Yeah.
I'm now in that mindset where it's like,
Yeah.
well, if I take the time to read this, I want to share it with the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always something, I guess.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just, it is a separate mindset.
It is.
It is a thing that is not, you don't see it everywhere, and it's definitely a thing that hits people who are creators.
Is there, just to shift back for a moment, obviously there's similar subjects, but the process between book 1 and book 2.
Yeah.
Like, how much did you take from book 1 and go like, oh no, I'm gonna do it completely different for book 2 as far as like research and process and writing?
There were a couple major differences. The major differences, I mean, the biggest is that Breaking the Chains is more like the history of an organization. So it's, there's key players in there, like Eisenhower is in there and von Braun is in there, and it's like weaving all these little stories together, but it also has to explain the technology and the history. So like there's little vignettes of the people, but it's not as narrative driven, whereas Fighting for Space is like I pitched it and wrote it and approached it as a dual biography of these two women. And making it as a more biography than straight history, even though it's like, I mean, we have 40 odd pages of references in there. It is deeply, deeply, painfully researched. It allowed me to kind of be a little bit freer with the form of writing and, looking at dialogue and looking at things that they wrote. But also having people as the main figure as opposed to an organization meant that they had memoirs that they wrote, they had letters, they had interviews that were done. So I could really use all of that primary stuff to build out their characters as opposed to just making it fit into this neat narrative, which was a lot of fun. Like researching a person is very different than researching an organization, especially Jackie Cochran, who saved everything, and it's all in the Eisenhower Library. And this book also afforded me the chance to travel to actually do some of that research as opposed to kind of gently asking archivists to send me PDFs of stuff that they might have lying around. So yeah, it was nice to be able to go in and just like sift through all of her papers and just take pictures of everything. I've got 6 boxes next to me on the shelf here of all of her papers, all of her notes and stuff that I use to kind of build out her storyline. And it's nuts. The amount of material is like, I'm just like, it's insane. But it was a fun way of researching a person as opposed to just the straight technology.
But I mean, you've been doing all this research. Space is still exciting for you because it's obviously not just that. It's the short form stuff. Like,
yeah,
you've been in the space for a while. So
yeah.
like you're still in love with it.
Yeah, and I am still in love with it, but I'm thinking I am kind of broadening my brand a little bit right now. And that's not to say that I want to get away from space. It's that I want to start doing stuff that's more tangential to space to kind of make it more about, because I love context, and I feel like that's always missing, right? Like, how much do people just, celebrate how great Apollo was, but also never talk about the fact that it was just an extension of the Cold War, and it wouldn't have happened, and Kennedy tried to cancel it, and we have all these contextual details that make the story more interesting. So I'm kind of broadening a little bit to go into more Cold War and mid-century history that kind of gives more context to the space stuff, which I'm really enjoying. So like doing this, I'm right now on my channel doing this deep dive into Cold War aerial espionage, which includes space because we're doing the Corona Discoverer satellites. But I've been doing the U-2 for 3 episodes, and it's so interesting to look at how much of this played into the Cold War relations, which to me is giving me a better understanding about where the space race was positioned in those early days. So it's all, to quote Marge Simpson's therapist, it's all a rich tapestry and it all goes together. So what I'm kind of enjoying is the stuff that makes the space stuff more interesting and more kind of feel richer to me.
Do you have an era of space that is your favorite to research?
I always say that my expertise is kind of 1930 to 1975, so pre-World War II rocketry to Apollo Soyuz. But I think my favorite, if we're looking at straight space, I mean it's hard. It's honestly hard to pick between the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. So I just do kind of Apollo era as my catch-all. But I I really like I like the early 60s. I think is kind of my favorite if we're going to like narrow down a little bit, because my interest in early technologies is always how you solve problems you don't even know you have yet. So like the first airplanes I find interesting, the first transatlantic steamships are just like, how do you solve these problems? And that was just the era where like everything was unknown and they were making best guesses, and unpacking those best guesses I find to be a really interesting conversation and a way to look at this stuff and understand, it's not just that they like, here's how you go into space. It was like, here's all the conversations they had to figure out who to send into space. And it was months of conversations.
Yeah, I've kind of enjoyed. I've read a lot of books. I think Kraft's and Krantz's.
Yeah.
In terms of spending a lot of time on the what ifs, and I think Krantz does it so much. Like Krantz's book on Apollo 13, his Apollo 13 section, probably one of the best written, because he spends, I don't know, so many pages dedicated to the things they didn't do, but explaining that these were the three options we had. And it's like, okay, so wow. And what you're talking about, which is kind of fascinating to me, is they didn't have the internet. It's not like there was a worldwide network. Like maybe most of the smartest guys were in that room, but they were talking about stuff no one had ever figured out before. And someone's best guess was the best you were going to do. At best, you could be like, well, I would prefer that guy's best guess over that guy's best guess, maybe. Yeah. But it's absolutely fascinating that's how we got to where we are now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, when you look at this is a time before you could computer model things. And I love looking at sort of the decisions for the shape of the Mercury spacecraft. Like they were trying to look at different shapes. They didn't have computer models to figure out how they would work. They made them out of paper and dropped them down a flight of stairs to see which design generated lift, and based on that would build wooden models to put into wind tunnels. Like it was trial and error based on like, I'm a smart dude. I'm going to think, and then I'm going to do some stuff, and we're just going to push it from there. Like, we have no idea if it was the best idea, but it was the only one that seemed to yield good results. Like, it's this really interesting era of trial and error. And, like, for me, that goes to aviation, like the early X-planes and stuff, like, trying to figure out, like, can we make something that goes faster than sound? Let's find out. Like, and the whole thing is wild. So I always say that, what you see in the history is like the tip of that iceberg, and then everything underneath it is just this massive support network of failed ideas and things that didn't get off the ground, and people who had something but were, shunted away for whatever reason. Like there's this rich history underneath it that goes very broad, and it supports this little bit that you see. And that's what I really like digging out, is just kind of the stuff that you don't read in the typical, in-depth article that like, no, this is scratching the surface. Come on now.
Well, and what I've one of the things, and this is my favorite piece about reading the same story over and over from different authors, and it's kind of why I gravitate towards the autobiographies and the biographies, is that it's the same story, but it's a completely different layer. Yes. I don't think anybody, I mean, it's mainly been astronauts. Kraft and Krantz are the first administrators and system guys whose books I've read, but it's just amazing that they all, especially from like the Mercury era through Apollo, they all tell the same stories. Yeah. But they're all so vastly different. Yeah.
Have you read any of the official NASA histories, like This New Ocean, On the Shoulders of Titan, and Chariots for Apollo?
No, one of them is on my shelf right now. Okay. And the other two,
they're big and they're daunting for sure.
Yeah, I'm so as a reader, I've been reading through a lot of different things. Like I've been reading through the Len Dayton bibliography, which is like a million things. And by the way, if you're talking about Cold War stuff, he did some very good nonfiction of some World War stuff that you might be interested in. But I made it a point to like not skimp on any of his nonfiction stuff, which is why I now know more about World War II than I ever thought I wanted to know. Yep. But because of that, like I've been kind of going back and forth. So I'll read some spy fiction and then I'll read some of this and I'll read some of this and I'll come back to that. So like I'm at a point now where I only have like 9 or 10 books left in Dayton's bibliography. So I'm about to get slightly more freedom in regards to my reading habits. And I think I'm probably going to dig in a little bit more on the space front, and those things, like I want to read them. Absolutely. I also don't know enough about where they come from. They have been mentioned in at least 3 books I've read so far. But the I think Chariots of Apollo is on my shelf right now.
Yeah, I love those books. I use them as references a lot. So basically, I mean, they're the internal program history, so they're obviously putting it in a good light. But like, you know, admittedly, they do not shy away from problems. They do not shy away from Apollo 1. Like but they're also built of like using all of the interoffice memos and all the correspondence and all the minutes of the meetings. So like when you look at the references, because that stuff exists in the NASA archives, but you can't necessarily find it. Like it's there, but if you're not going to Washington. So it's a great source of like the little details. So when you read that kind of more neutral history and then you compare it to all the astronaut memoirs and stuff, it's just a different perspective, because this is like, you know, you hear about this conversation from this guy and this conversation from this guy, but then you hear about the meeting minutes from this official history and you're like, oh, this is the same meeting and you all had different experiences and this is what was actually on the table. So that's why I recommend those to people. They are dense and they are long, but they're very readable. They're not like, there's also the Apollo program chronologies, and those are literally like, on this date this happened, on this date this happened, and those are like, it's like reading dried egg on toast. But it is a great reference.
Well, it does remind me when they did the 50th year of the Apollo landing, when they created that website that in real time you could listen to all the transmissions, and then they did the same thing for Apollo 13, and I felt bad for the Apollo 12 guys, because I was like, well, they could have just released the Apollo 12 stuff. Like they didn't have to.
I have an action figure of Pete Conrad on my desk, so I also feel bad for the Apollo 12 guys. Also, my cat Pete Conrad is sleeping on the couch right now. Okay, let me ask, why Pete Conrad? You could have named him after any other astronaut. I mean, obviously, you went with Pete. Why Pete? Pete, so when I started looking into when I started reading about this stuff, it was so far beyond my little 7-year-old brain. And then when I was 10, Apollo 13 came out. And Big is one of my favorite movies. So I was like, oh, I know Tom Hanks. Oh, there were real people in there. And then it was like, all of a sudden, my little brain opened up to the idea of personalities. And not long after that, Tom Hanks did the From the Earth to the Moon miniseries on HBO. Which, if you haven't seen it, but I'm sure you have, it is fantastic. Yes. The Apollo 12 episode of that is so fun and captures how much fun that crew had. So after I saw that, I started getting into the crew memoirs and biographies and learning about them. And that mission always just seemed like the most fun. And at this point, I've read the mission transcript. I've looked at all the stuff, and like, they were just 3 best friends going to the moon one day. Like, it's wild. So I loved that. For me, it was Pete Conrad's mission that made me realize that there's human stories that I can tell, and I can discuss history and science through a human narrative, which is a huge thing as a young writer who didn't even know she was going to be a writer, was like a huge thing to learn. And I just always loved that, like, he was such a personality and such a character and never got any love. And I was like, this is an important, like, you know, role model for me growing up. I love that he took his job seriously, had fun with it, was 5'6.5", damn it, because fellow short people. And I just, so Pete Conrad is curled up on my couch.
I always feel bad because I know, look, it's the closest I can come to it, as a fellow, I don't know what space geeks, spacophiles, I don't know what the term is, but I feel like we are like as close ranked as like Marvel or like DC or like Star Wars fanboys, where like, yeah, okay, so everybody knows Iron Man and everybody knows Neil Armstrong and everybody knows Batman, but you do know that they didn't just go to the moon on 11 and they didn't go on 13. Like, there were other those weren't random
Yeah.
numbers. There were other things.
Yeah.
And I just, all of this information just kind of like is in our heads. And then no one wants to talk to you about it. Like, it's just, and
Yeah.
like, I've straddled the Marvel and DC and Star Wars thing as well. And I understand that there are people that are like, yeah, don't, I like the movie. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I know we went to the moon.
Yeah.
I'm done. And it's
Yeah.
always exciting to find somebody where you can be like, I just finished reading Deke. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's that, and it's also fun to find people that are like, wait, tell me about this thing, and that want to learn like the weird intricate details. And because like I don't think you can see it, but because the lighting is so bad, but my mug just says keep calm and try SCE to Ox.
I like it.
And when I do my Sunday morning Twitch streams at 7 a.m. because Europe, I drink out of this mug, and I actually have an SCE command in my chat to A, explain it, and B, say that the coffee is effectively turning my brain from SCE to Ox. And it's fun because it's a goofy thing, but then people learn a little bit about the story and they're like, that's wild. I had no idea a lunar mission was struck by lightning and that they didn't cancel it and that nobody died. And I'm like, yep, we're learning today. We're learning about how a rocket going through clouds generates friction. We're learning about this mission. And it's like, it's a fun way to kind of excite people a little bit. And I always say that my goal as a creator is always like, if you can swing by my channel or one of my social feeds or something and like learn a little thing about space or about history that you didn't know and be like, huh, cool, and then move on about your day, like that's all I want, is to give you that little moment of like, huh, I like those moments. So it's if I can leverage something weird into teaching you a little thing about space and give you that feeling of like, I learned something today, then it's a win.
All right, so you're a published author.
Mm-hmm.
You've been on television.
Yes.
You have a YouTube channel.
Yes.
And you stream on Twitch.
I do.
Do you have and obviously you've done interviews and radio and podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite form of communicating? And I'm taking in person out of it for the moment. I'm just, as far as media is concerned, do you have a favorite now that you've basically experienced the spectrum?
It's a little bit ridiculous how many things I've done, but this is what being a creative is, especially a creative during a pandemic. You just monetize your life. I'm very new to Twitch. I've only been streaming on Twitch for a little over a month now, but it's very quickly become something that I really like because I allow it to be very freeform and open. Like, it feels like just chatting with you right now, only, the other person is a wall of chat text going by. But it's, last night we did one and we discussed a paper that I found on personality types and motivations behind digital expositionism, aka sending lewd pictures to somebody unsolicited, and like the personality types. And we ended up in this hour-long discussion that was a very serious thing based on this research that I found. And like, we have doctors in there and psychologists in there, and it was like this really fun chat. And I've brought stuff up and like shown 16mm film and just discussing missions very casually. And like, some people are super into the space stuff and have pointed questions. Some people have no idea what they're looking at. And it's just this really fun way to just like engage people, have a drink, just like relax. And I like how casual it is. It kind of makes me, maybe it's because I miss giving talks and I miss kind of engaging an audience, because that's so much fun to get people excited and see that. So being able to do that in a forum, it feels more natural than the YouTube stuff, which is, doing YouTube videos, I'm talking to my camera alone in my apartment, and then I edit it and then I put it out there, and then that's it. There's a distance with YouTube that you don't get when you're doing something live.
Yeah, I get that. I'm new to Twitch as far as I have a friend whose channel I moderate. I have been watching or taking part in following streams for about a year and a half-ish.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's weird when you get to that point where you turn on your television and you go, okay, TV, YouTube, or Twitch. And you go,
yeah,
all right, well, I'll just check and see who's on first.
Yeah.
And I'll go to Twitch. And it's such a mind, like, it's just, my behavior is now changed. Like 10 years ago, I just turn on the TV, or it's like TV or internet, right? Like now it's just so different but I love the community building aspect. I think.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's one of the things that creators, it's twofold. Your community is a reflection of you, but you also get to curate your community a little bit. So it's a weird give and take both ways somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's and for me, it's different and very interesting because my YouTube audience, I mean, I can see my analytics and I know that it skews to kind of, it definitely skews to people who grew up with the space program when it was in its infancy or kind of grew up in the post-Apollo era and are loving kind of revisiting these things as adults. That's definitely my demographic, and it's great because there's a lot of people that have great stories to share, and it's, I love creating these deep dive videos and stuff. It's so gratifying for like all of my nerdy research needs, but when I started really watching, I mean, I've been very active on Twitch as a viewer for like a year and a half, so about the same as you, but like the more I got involved and active in chats, I realized that like this brings together people from all over the place with all different backgrounds who, I mean, in my case and what I watch, were brought together by Mario games. And it's so interesting that it's like the kinds of people that you're in there, and you're like, this is actually a very interesting group of people who are super curious. And as soon as I started streaming and started talking about all the nerd stuff, to see the people that were like, I had no idea I wanted to know about this. And it's become this interesting way of curating a very different audience that's just as excited and is almost more engaged because it's real time. And it really does just feel like a fun little community that you just get to jump into and have that interaction with, as opposed to like presenting, like giving a lecture, which is kind of what YouTube is. And I really enjoy both of them, but there's something really nice about just having this little super nerdy, very niche nerdy community on Twitch. That's nice.
Well, it's probably more so than any other medium. It's your little corner of the internet. Like it really is.
And literally, if someone comes in, I always feel like Twitch is like my house. If I don't want you there, I can just kick you out. And it's like, I really can. I can just say in my rules, like anything, if you say something that makes anybody feel uncomfortable, I'm just going to get rid of you. And that's all it is. And it's nice to be able to, because like, we all know the rule. You just don't read the YouTube comments. Oh my God, the YouTube comments. I got one today of someone like mansplaining Eisenhower's real name to me. I was just like,
so do you really not read them, or do you read them?
I do read them.
Okay.
And part of it is because I hate when someone leaves a comment that has nothing to do with the video, and then all of the engagement on the video is just people fighting in the comments. Because you don't want to do I researched these videos for weeks. Like, I want people to learn something. And it's just like, it sucks when I'm like, oh my God, you guys are all literally just having a conversation about whether or not it's okay to comment on my hair, which, spoiler alert, it's not. So like, I delete those comments just to kind of try to focus the conversation in the comments. But it's also because I want to just get rid of the cesspool that ends up popping up of people being like, oh, so many comments about my hair. It's just so irrelevant.
Has it ever been good? Like, have you ever gotten like that person that's like, oh, I know something about this, and they tell you one little tidbit you didn't know.
For sure.
So there are some good things.
There 100%, and that's why like I want to get rid of all the crap, because I want those good ones to be there, because those are the conversations I want to have. And there's always people who are like, I remember watching this mission as a kid, and here's my story, here's my experience. I used to work on this, and I love that. I love reading those. They're so interesting, and it makes me feel like, even though the community aspect on YouTube is separate because it's, 2 weeks between recording and actually putting it up, that it's out of my mind by the time everyone sees it. It makes me feel like there is this nice little niche of people that do want to engage on the material, and I love that. It's heartwarming to me. So I get rid of the negative stuff just to not have that kind of negativity looming.
So I want to ask you about the personal aspect of it, because I absolutely love those stories. And unfortunately for our generation, and I don't know if this is the same for you, it's tragedy. Like, we don't have an Apollo moment, right? Like, we have Challenger, we have Columbia.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have those live, like, really good things until now, where we're starting to get like successes with SpaceX and like additional things. Do you feel any I don't know. I'm going to say personally, I feel a little resentment that I don't have that like man landing on the moon thing, because like it's not like the shuttle. And I watched, within my lifetime, I think I watched almost all of the shuttle launches that I could, and most of the landings. It was just cool, but it was not Apollo cool. Do you know what I mean? So we don't have that like, oh, we did this thing that's never been done before.
It's true. And I think what it is a little bit is like we're doing so many things that have never been done before, like SpaceX successfully landing and reusing its first stages. One, some people would argue that's similar. The first commercial or the first private missions to the space station is exciting. But you're right. It doesn't have that same, like, the world was brought together to see this thing. But I think that's so rare. I mean, I'm trying to think of what other moments. I mean, what other positive moments brought the world together? I mean, Apollo, like, again, people ignore this. Like, Apollo had a 50% approval rating when Apollo 11 launched. Like, people didn't love it. We had Vietnam. We had, like, a lot of social issues coming to a head in America. And then NASA's operating in this little bubble, doing this thing. But when they landed, the world stopped and kind of forgot all of that stuff just for a brief moment and was kind of united with this like peak of humanity for a minute. I can't really think of another moment when that happened. And I think part of it is the technology, like that we were able to broadcast it live. Obviously not we, because neither of us were around, but, it was able to be broadcast live around the world, that it was able to be shared in near real time. There isn't really something that has allowed that to happen in the same way, because now we have everything shared in real time. So I don't know, maybe it just doesn't feel special. Like when those moments do happen, there's so many things that are happening at the same time that we're competing for it. I mean,
I mean, you're going live on Twitch with hundreds of other creators, no matter when you decide to go live. Like even if you went off schedule, you're competing.
And there's some stat. There's like 2 days worth, like 48 hours worth of content uploaded onto YouTube every minute or something. Yep. There's some like ridiculous stat like that. Don't quote me. That's not it. But it's like there's so much stuff out there to consume that I feel like our attention is being divided. Whereas there was less of it. And I wasn't around in the 60s. I might be making this up, but I feel like having, researched it a whole bunch, there weren't that many TV stations. No. You had radio, people read books. There was not this constant flow of information. There's not this constant access to everyone doing everything all the time. So I feel like we're diluted. We're almost diluting our potential big moments, maybe.
Well, I mean, first of all, that's the reason that I still read physical books.
Yes.
Because I'm just like, well, this is great. I'm reading this. But I want to go back because you talk about the NASA bubble, and it's my favorite part of every NASA biography and especially the autobiographies.
Yeah.
Because they all talk about what happens after the moon landing and like when they go out for the first time or like they retire and they're done and they go out into the real world and they have no idea what has become, because whenever they went in, whether it was the late 50s or the early 60s, they're in this bubble for so long, and we do that too, ironically. Like I'm guilty of it. Like I will. And what's unfortunate for maybe our generation that talks to exactly the point you just made is that I can work on a blog post, a deep research blog post, and go in a bubble for a week and be as confused when I came out as the Apollo guys were when they were in Apollo for a decade and went, what happened to the world?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, one thing I always like to bring up when we're discussing the bubble is because I have a signed picture from Jerry Griffin and I think Glenn Lunny. It's the celebration of Apollo 13 splashdown. And if you look at that picture, they are all wearing white dress shirts and skinny ties. And it looks like even style hadn't evolved within NASA because they were so insulated in this little bubble. It really wasn't until like the early 70s that they started to even show that they were aware of the outside world. So like when you look at pictures of the Apollo era, you even see that they are not aware of social trends and changes happening. But the bubble thing that we kind of all experience, I mean, I 100% do it. I mean, I do it daily. And I think we have this, Twitter, I think, is the best/worst for it, is that things will just get picked up and start trending. And if you aren't following the social media stuff, the news that's happening in real time, there's always something breaking. You can go and like read for an hour just to take a break, and you come back and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? Like, I feel like I do that all the time. And I've stopped, like, I've actually deleted it all from my phone even, because it was just getting too like soul crushing to constantly see this stuff. But I also can't not have social media, but it's just like, it's wild that you wake up in the morning, it's like, how many new things have happened right now that the world is freaking out about? Like, it's so easy to get into this little bubble because the bubbles are so much smaller now. I don't know if this analogy is working at all.
No, it is. But I mean, to go back to what we were talking about, though, in order to get your Apollo moment, it would have to be so much grander, because within those little things that happen, like when we go to bed, because the world is a 24-hour cycle, something good or bad can happen. Mm-hmm. And those things trending are never neutral. They're usually good or bad. So in order to have that one good thing, and even now, those things may also be in the past. That's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking that, like, to something that would be grand on the scale of Apollo, I mean, Apollo's kind of set the bar really high. And I've said this before, I have videos about this, that like Apollo kind of ruined spaceflight because it gave us this unrealistic expectation of what we should and could be doing, when, again, we ignore the context of Cold War and war era funding and pushing everything forward the way it did. You know, we would need something that would be grander. So like would returning to the moon do it? Maybe. Would landing on Mars do it? Maybe, but that's going to come with a lifetime delay, and we're not going to be able to experience it the same way. You know, it's almost, what about the Curiosity landing on Mars in 2012? I mean, that almost did it.
Maybe, but I think
stopped, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah, but I think going back to the moon would be a good step in the right direction, because it's an entire... We're an entire generation that didn't experience that in real time. So experiencing that in real time will make a difference. And I wrote a blog post, I think within hours of Neil Armstrong dying, being like, how come we haven't been back yet? And I feel like I was just one of a million bloggers that wrote that same post. Yeah. It felt that way. But it's something that, and I have little doodles and notes from like when I was much younger, the first time I was interested in space, where I was like, how come we haven't been back yet? Yeah. And there's something romantic about the moon that Mars will not get, because the heroes, quote unquote, because that's what they'll be, that go back to the moon will be coming back in my lifetime. It's not. Yeah.
Oh, and I think there's something about, like, I mean, the moon, just even going back to like movies and music from the 1930s and 40s. I mean, the moon is this romantic thing about on a moonlit night. You know, there is this, like, the moon occupies a space in pop culture and always has, as something that's like, that's special, that's a little bit alien, although not called alien. You know, it's unique. It holds something, and going there makes it, like, that's so much more tangible because we can also see it. This is the other thing that people kind of struggle with when we're talking about why aren't we on Mars yet too, is like, I've said this, like, man, moon, decade are three very tangible things. We know what a human is, we know what the moon is, and a decade, we all have a bit better understanding of what 10 years is. But human Mars 30 years or so does not have the same, like, punch to it, because, like, we still know the human, but, like, no one really understands how far Mars is. I've spoken to people who are like, I would totally go to Mars because I could always just call my friends, and I'm like, not with the lifetime delay. You can't. You can't. You don't understand how far it is. You don't come home. You can't turn around. It's not a car trip. And 30 years or so, like, how many people can really grasp the length of time? And I think we see it a lot in, like, the way, you know, the new administration will forever be changing NASA's forward momentum. And I did a whole deep video about how politics is just ruining spaceflight as well. But it's also, you know, that's kind of how it's made. that like it's so hard to lay the foundation that will not only outlive one president's administration, but like 10 administrations. It could be this like hugely long thing that has to somehow survive these massive political shifts. That's really hard. So like when we talk about having that moment, there's so many hurdles that like I don't think we even understand how many hurdles to get by to even think about having that moment.
Do you...
Sorry, I'm such a downer.
No. So I've been quiet for a while, but I also agree with absolutely everything you're saying. And I also go back and I look at history and I go,
yeah.
The other problem, especially with politics being a 24/7 news cycle more than any other, is that, and this isn't just with the current regime, this is always, we want the credit. It's kind of human nature.
Yeah.
And the person who signs the bill that funds the launch for the mission to Mars, the manned mission to Mars, will not be probably alive when that success happens. So there's no impetus for it, right? Like there's no like, hey, by the end of the decade, it's like, well, it's going to take a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
And I think we also get ruined by, there's a lot of pop culture, space flight, Star Wars, Trek, etc., that has happened since Apollo, where you go, well, how come we don't have a faster than light drive yet? Well, it's not just as easy as writing it into the script. So there's all these like different factors that are like thrown into a pot and you go, all right, well, so what do we do now? Low Earth orbit? Okay. Like
no, I mean that point of wanting to take credit I think is so interesting, and this is again one of those Kennedy things that we just never talk about. Like he did it knowing full well that he would probably not be in office when it landed if anything happened, because the original target date was 1967, so he would still be in office, but realistically he knew it might not happen. But he also was very concerned about his legacy. And that thought that, I don't know if you've heard this White House recording between him and Jim Webb talking about, it was in 62 or 60, they had two conversations. I think it was in 63 that they had this conversation. And he says, I don't want my legacy to be the guy that started this boondoggle of a program and had to cancel it, and it's just terrible, and I wasted all this money. I need to stop it. I have to stop it because this is ruining my legacy. Because like you want the credit, but you also don't want to tarnish your reputation, and it becomes this really interesting play. And when you like that's a huge part. That's a huge part of what people do. I mean, Trump's whole thing of like we need to get back to the moon in 4 years, but like has no understanding of the technology behind it, and everyone's like he's pushing us forward. It's like, but not for any reason that is technologically relevant or realistic. And it just becomes this thing of like everyone, people do it for ego. I've written a lot about like this idea of people wanting to have their Kennedy moment, but not really understanding how hard the Kennedy moment is, because you don't necessarily get the payoff of it, and you don't know it's going to be a Kennedy moment until you do it.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like, and I can't agree more, because everything I've read points to the fact, like, and this is it's not a problem, but the problem I'm still going to call it a problem, issue, concern, I guess, is that if you take the statement you just made and then go back and read any history book, it will literally corroborate exactly what you said. Yeah. And okay, but we're supposed to learn from history. So, like, we should know a better way. I feel like, well, I've been feeling a lot, especially the last 4 years, that it would be really nice if there was like a White House historian on staff that was like, hey, so we tried to do this in 1953 and it didn't work, so let's just learn from this. But I mean, how many times, like the thing with looking at history, is it's so easy to see things when you're looking back at it and not think about, and we have this tendency to not think about the reality of like the unknowns. Like it's so easy to look at Kennedy and be like, he knew what he was doing with Apollo, or I mean any president doing something grand. It's like, no, they tried something and it worked, and that's good, I guess. I mean, depending on what it is, whatever. But anyways, fair. It's like, no one's going into anything thinking it's like the sure bet.
So like, it kind of makes it a little bit more understandable maybe why presidents struggle to do that or don't want to do it or try to do it but then don't follow through on it. Like it's a very complicated, it becomes, I think, more about I'm rambling now, but it almost becomes more about like human nature and personality types and who's willing to take that risk and put their reputation on the line, having no idea if it'll pay off.
Have you ever made a risk that you didn't know would pay off?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I was, I think my biggest, first of all, I've never had a job. That's probably a risk.
I mean, technically you're, I guess, self-employed, right?
I am self-employed. Yeah. No, I always joke. There's a great, I forget what episode it is on Seinfeld, but George is like, you know what I hate when you see the same people every day and you have to say hello to them and you're just like, I hate this. And you're in the office. Don't you hate that? And Jerry's like, I've never had a job. I'm like, there's nothing in that show that resonates with me as much as Jerry saying, I've never had a job. I'm like, I've literally never had a regular job. When I was 29, I ended a relationship. I picked up and I moved to LA with a drugged up cat and moved into an apartment that I'd never seen before. That was a risk I didn't know if it was going to pay off.
Are you still in that apartment?
I am. Okay. I am still in that apartment. I still have the cat. Yeah, those big risks are definitely hard, but like that risk was, it only affected my life and Pete's life. But he's kind of, a package deal with me. It wasn't a risk that was going to affect millions of people with my decision. So like you start to understand, I don't know, the idea of making that big risk is it's scary. And when people are affected by it, I don't want that responsibility. Have you ever taken like a crazy risk and you're like, oh, good God?
I mean, the closest I've come is I've been unemployed for a year during a pandemic and I've chosen to kind of live off of savings and find a career instead of a job. And I know there's something weird about this risk because everybody's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm not crazy enough to do something that would endanger myself. If I have to, I will get a job. But there's something in my brain that's like, the guy who can't code a website or can't write coherently, let him pick up the boxes. You should find a job where you can build a website or do this or do that or that. And so I'm looking for this career that it seems like people are less and less likely to care about because all the people I know in careers with any skill that I have are overworked and underpaid right now.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of the way it goes. But I don't know. Like the biggest risk I've got right now is like I only have a finite amount of savings. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, to go back to creative people, I think that's a risk a lot of creatives end up taking because it's, it fuels the creativity and gives you a very good impetus. I always joke, but it's not a joke. The best motivator for self-employed people is fear.
One of the things that Amy and I have in common, not just as content creators, but as people, is that we are genuinely curious and not afraid of a little research, and that we love reading helps this immensely. But as Amy dives deeper into not just the golden era of space exploration surrounding the space race, but the context of the decisions that shaped that era, her journey will diverge into many different arenas of history. She will embark on journeys much longer than she anticipated, and undoubtedly she will find many more questions than answers. That is the nature of education. We seek, and once we find, we ask why, and seek again. We discussed the four sons at Passover a bit. The four sons represent the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. This has been updated to the four children, but it's based on asking why the celebration of Passover is taking place to begin with. The wise one asks about details. The wicked one asks, whatever does this mean to you? The simple asks what it means, and of course, there's the child who does not know how to ask. If you are Jewish, this is all familiar and perhaps overdone as it is an annual thing, but if you are not, this may be foreign to you. Rest assured, I bring it up because I can't believe I didn't remember all of them quickly off the top of my head during our conversation, and because as I've become older, I've found that to me, we are all of them. Not concurrently, but there are times when we are the wise, the wicked, the simple, or do not know how to ask. Thank you for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 35. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, the show at The Palmer Files, or Amy at Amy Shira Teitel. That's AMYSHIRATEITEL. You can also use that same @ to follow her on Instagram, or you can visit amyshirateitel.com for links to her books and more content. She's also on YouTube at youtube.com/vintagespace and streaming on Twitch as The Space Vixen. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings, including my review of Amy's book, Fighting for Space, on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if there's a topic or guest you'd like me to consider. All right, Amy, do you have one final question for me?
I do. So I think about this a lot with my stuff that, you know, when you're growing up and you love stuff and your parents are like, it's just a phase. And then when you're grown up and you get to do it on your own time and with your own money, you're like, I still really love this thing from my childhood for whatever reason. Do you have a thing from your childhood, however goofy or weird or obscure it was, that you're like, it was not a phase, I came back to it and I more kind of just love leaning into this now as an adult?
Yeah, this is going to sound absolutely weird. I treat the Palmer brand, right? The agentpalmer.com is the blog and the Palmer Files as a podcast. I treat this like a job and I treat it seriously.
Yeah.
And to me, even when it was not my full-time gig, and it's not because I make no money at it, but it's all I've got to do right now, it reminds me that when I was 5 and 6, I used to borrow, I guess, and take the hand-me-down like briefcase that my father had and pretend to go to work. Like, I was the kid that was like, now granted, we've established I'm an only child, so like I wasn't, like I
Only
didn't
children definitely come up with their own weird little games.
So it was like, I'm going to pretend to go to work, and I pretended to go to work, and now I'm not pretending, and I have these processes that I've kind of created for myself, and you know, I'm quote unquote pretending to go to work because this still doesn't feel like work, but I treat it seriously. Yeah. So that way, when somebody's like, "Well, you've been out of work for a year. What have you been doing?" You'd be like, "Well, actually, I've been editing audio and recording and scheduling and promoting and writing and editing I mean, it comes up a lot on this show. I don't know if this is what I want to do for like real. But absolutely as a passion project, like I look back at borrowing my father's old hand-me-down briefcase and be like, and I didn't tell anyone, right? Like, it's just like in my head, I'm like, I'm going to work now. And you walk out and you go into the other room and you open your briefcase and you take out whatever pad and you do whatever. And now I have my own office where I can kind of play work, except when I'm playing work, I actually have published things that I can throw out on the internet. That's kind of the thing, I think, for me.
Nice. I like that. That's a really good one. That's really good. I like that story.
I mean, luckily, I was an only child, so I don't have like a sibling who's like, remember that time when you used to pretend to go to work?
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice that you can control the narrative of the potentially slightly embarrassing story from your childhood.
100%.
Very good. I like it.